Hi guys, my name is Violet. Today, I'm going to open up about something I've never talked about before. The fact that I became a grandmother at 26 years old. I know, it's a little insane. So how did I end up being one of the world's youngest grandmothers? It started like a lot of stories do. I met a cute boy when I was 13. His name was Carter. And he was hot. Like hot. Supermodel hot. Man of your dreams hot. On top of that, he was kind. I had a rough time with my family, so he really became like a second home to me. When we dated, I wanted to do everything he wanted to do. I was afraid I wouldn't be able to keep him otherwise, and I felt like I needed him. A few weeks after we got together for the first time, I realized I had missed my period. I had gone through the talk, so I knew that I might be in trouble. But I was 13. I mean, what are the chances I was actually pregnant? Seeing pregnant on that test was the worst moment of my life. Well, second to telling my parents. Things were thrown, words were said, tears were shed. They couldn't believe their baby had gone and done something so terrible. They threatened to kick me out for good, but then they had another solution. My parents sent me across the country to have the baby with my aunt. That way, no one from my town would know, not even Carter. I disappeared from the town, from my old life, like a ghost. I was scared. As the pregnancy wore on, I started to get more and more attached to my future kid. What were they going to look like? Would it be a boy? A girl? Would it have my eyes? My parents promised they would raise my child as their own to avoid any suspicion. That way, I could go on with my life and no one would know. By the time I went into labor, I was excited to meet my kid. It was the most painful thing I'd ever felt in my life. When she was finally out, I was so relieved, but only for a minute. Doctors were rushing around. She looked blue. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I got wheeled out of the room, panic coursing through me. Was she okay? What was going on? I laid in bed for a couple of hours. When my aunt came into the room, I knew something wasn't right. She told me that my daughter had died. All of the color faded out of my life. From that point on, I was a completely different person. I went back home to talk to Carter, but he had completely disappeared from the town. No one had heard from him in months. I wondered what had happened to him for years. I looked him up on social media. I called his parents' phone, and it said it was out of service. It was like they went into hiding or something. I figured it was probably because of me, because Carter hadn't wanted to be a dad. Seeing how hard I was searching, my mom sat me down one day. She explained to me that when she asked Carter to financially contribute, he ran off to live with his dad in Germany so he wouldn't have to legally support me. My suspicions were right, but it really stung. He had promised he wanted to be there with me. He'd even offered to raise our child with me, but apparently he hadn't meant it. With Carter gone, I started playing video games all day and studying them online. I think I was so drawn to them because the idea of being in a different world, a world where things like this didn't happen, was too good to pass up. I went to college out of state for video game design, and for a while, everything was fine. Except, honestly, I was so afraid to get close to anyone again. One day, there was a knock at my door. I had a face full of frozen pizza and was wearing my PJs, so I almost didn't answer. But the urgent knocks told me I had no other choice. I opened the door to see a young girl standing there. She had to be like 12, 13. The second she saw my face, she started to sob. I mean, I get it. I looked like a mess, but come on. That's when she told me she had nowhere else to go, and she rushed into my apartment. I literally had no idea who this girl was. She was a mess. I started to wonder if she had lost her mind. I told her to get out, or I would call the cops. She pleaded with me to stop, and then she said something that would change my life forever. I'm Kea, your daughter. My whole world shattered. I started to question who I was. What the heck was going on here? My daughter was dead, wasn't she? That's when Kea explained everything. She had been raised by my aunt. She found out I was her real mother at an early age by mistake. Since then, she'd always wanted to meet me, even though my aunt wouldn't let her. I had to sit down for a minute. My daughter had never died? Everyone had just lied to me? This whole time? Why had they told me she was dead? When I asked her why she was here, things got even more complicated. Kea told me she was pregnant, and my aunt had kicked her out. I felt like I was looking at myself in the mirror. I looked around at my pizza box, video game-filled apartment, and I realized I didn't have a choice. Kea needed a home. Kea was in the same situation I had been in years before. I couldn't just ship her off like my parents had. I couldn't reject her or lie to her like everyone had lied to me. So I welcomed Kea into my home, and I helped her with her pregnancy. For the first time in my life, I actually felt connected to someone. The first few weeks were rough, and she was crying every day. But after a few months, Kea asked me when she was going to meet her dad. I told her no one had heard from Carter in years. She shook her head and handed me an envelope. Inside, it read, "Hey kiddo, we've never met, but I love you. Your dad, Carter." It was his handwriting. You know when you want to throw up and throw confetti at the same time? That was me in that moment. He was still around? When did he get back from Germany? Why had he abandoned me? I looked at the front of the envelope. There was no return address, but it was stamped from the city I was living in now. I flipped the letter over to see it was written on stationery from the local hospital. I knew what I had to do. With Kea in tow, I rushed to the nearby hospital to be reunited with him. I asked the counter if there was a Carter working there, but everyone told me there wasn't. I felt crushed. I realized maybe he had just been a patient. I searched online for him, but to no avail. Eventually, I decided I had to cut my losses. Again. Maybe it just wasn't meant to be with Carter. As heartbreaking as that was, I was going to go through another birth alone. The day Kea went into labor, I rushed her to the hospital. She was scared, but I told her everything was going to be okay. If I could do it, so could she. When she was delivering, the NICU nurse came in. When I met the NICU nurse's eyes, my heart started beating out of my chest. It was Carter. I would know those eyes anywhere. I saw a tear start to form when he realized it was me. I glanced at his name tag, which said Andrew, his middle name. We snuck out into the hall. Without hesitation, we kissed. I cried, asking why he had left me. He told me the truth. My parents had paid him to leave town and threatened to make his life a nightmare if he stayed. He'd been in this city living as Andrew ever since. I couldn't believe it, but I knew the lies and confusion were all over now. Later that day, we got to hold our granddaughter in our arms and our daughter, both for the first time. We're working together to raise our granddaughter and Kea at the same time. But I finally feel like I have a family.